Today's episode of Boundary Breakers, I sit down with Erika Badan, the former CEO of Barstool Sports. Erika was CEO of Barstool from 2016 to 2023. She was at the helm alongside Dave Portnoy as Barstool sort of experienced a meteoric rise into fame. And we talk about what it was like at Barstool, what it was like to work with Dave Portnoy. And we talk about her current role with Food52, being a best-selling author of the book, Nobody Cares About Your Career. We have a fun, interesting discussion that I think you guys are going to appreciate. Boundary Breakers is brought to you by Carter & Clark. What I'd love to do, just 30 seconds, this is called Boundary Breakers podcast. And I mean, I was just telling Leo, you're the quintessential boundary breaker for, I think, a couple of reasons. But with the new media and then your role with Barstool, you've broken a lot of boundaries. So I'm thrilled to be able to have you. But what I'd love to do, if it's okay with you, I'd love for you to give maybe just like 2 minutes, just quick background, like where you were born, grew up.
Sure.
And then maybe just a few minutes on early career. We could talk about Barstool. And then I really want to give you a platform, some opportunity to talk about Food52 and also your book.
Great. That sounds awesome.
Okay.
You want me to just jump in?
Yeah, fantastic. Could you just tell us a little bit about, just early life, where you grew up, families, that type of thing?
Yeah. So I was born in Colorado and I moved. My parents were from the East Coast. My mom was from Connecticut and my dad was from Vermont. So we moved to New Hampshire. So I spent most of my childhood in the woods, I guess I would say. I played a lot of sports. We didn't really have a TV. And then when we finally got one, no one will identify with this, but you had to get up off the couch and change the dial. My brother and I had an hour of television a week that we had to share. And I always say that that's where I learned how to negotiate, because making the most of that hour was a big deal. I went to public school. I played a lot of sports. I played sports in college. I went to a liberal arts college in Maine. And then I really got my first big break. I wanted to live in Boston for the summer. And, a bunch of my girlfriends did too. And I applied to Fidelity Investments and I got an internship at Fidelity. And the internship was really just being a receptionist. And I was insanely bored, but loving it, loving being in a city and loving dressing up for work. I really believe in internships, and I love interns, and I'm so grateful for my internship. That, long story short, I just tried to work and make the most of it, and I got asked to come back to Fidelity after I graduated, which really gave me my first taste for business. I thought I wanted to be a lawyer. I worked in the legal department. I did not want to be a lawyer. I hated it. And I was making, at the time, this was the late 90s, I was making $50,000, and I wanted to go work in advertising where you made $17,000. And the HR people at Fidelity were like, "You're crazy. What are you doing?" And I was like, "I know, I have to do it. I have to do it. I have to do it." So I left the legal department to go work in the ad department. And this thing was just beginning called the internet. And because nobody wanted to touch it because it wasn't cool like print or television, I started to work in the internet. And that was really it for me. I've never left the internet since. And from there, I went and worked at a bunch of ad agencies. I worked for Microsoft. I traveled the world. I built a lot of stuff outside the country. And publishing, and really the intersection between brands and making money and publishing content for consumers and thinking about how people would interact with things on the internet, really became what I was most passionate about. And my career's really been centered around that ever since.
Yeah. Well, that's perfect explanation. Thank you so much for that. So tell us, you eventually became CEO of Barstool. So how did that come about? I guess you got connected with Dave Portnoy. I mean, walk us through that.
I had a bunch of big jobs in media and tech, mostly at the portal. So I worked for Yahoo, I worked for Microsoft, I worked for AOL, and I left AOL to go join a startup in the music space. and was kind of another big jump in my career where I was the CMO of AOL. I realized I didn't want to be a CMO anymore. I wanted to be an operator. I became the CRO and president of a company. And I modeled the whole thing on Barstool Sports. Lived in Boston. I was around when Dave started it. I loved it. I loved the humor. It was so janky and, it was so small at that point, but it was quite mighty and cool in Boston. And I really loved Barstool. And I was working with Justin Bieber and other artists like that. And I was explaining to them what Dave Portnoy was doing at Barstool Sports, none of them had ever heard of, and how they should apply that to their following and their content. And had a meeting with the Chernin Group to raise money for this startup. And they said, hey, we've just put money into this company you've never heard of called Barstool Sports. And I was like, the record's scratched. And I was like, not only have I heard of it, I love it. I pulled out my phone, I showed them the app, and I couldn't stop talking about it. My business partner was like, I hate you. You're killing me right now. And long story short, they told me they were looking for a CEO, and I did everything in my power to get introduced to Dave because I knew that job was for me. And I met Dave in New York City, and I, had a few meetings with him. I met the board, I met the Chernin people, and pretty much started working with Barstool from that moment on. And I worked there almost a decade.
Yeah. Oh, I love it. That's a great story. So when you went in, did you go in, with a specific plan or specific mindset, thinking, look, I know, because what you did was incredible with regard to, just building the brand, building the community, and then delivering the content, to that sort of rabid fan base. Did you have that plan sort of in mind, or was it like, look, I love these people, I love this brand, I know we could do something with it?
I would say I had a plan, which is I knew I wanted to use the information I had and the places I had been before and apply it to Barstool. So I knew we needed to distribute more content. We needed to get into podcasting. We needed to move into video. We needed to sell to more advertisers. We needed to pump up the commerce business. So I loosely knew that those were the big things that should happen or could happen. But, I think there's like a great Muhammad Ali quote, which is like, you don't know how to react to something until you get punched in the face. And that was joining Barstool was a punch in the face. And I was like, oh God, there's a lot I have to learn here. And, we kind of figured it out as we went along.
Right. I love that. What was, I want to be careful about how I say this, but Barstool is sort of known as a men's platform, sort of a bro type
it was
platform.
Broy and rowdy. And
right. I think
off color would be a nice way to say it.
Off color, right. Some people described it, or some media organizations described it as a pirate ship.
Yeah.
What was it like as a female in that environment?
Yeah, I loved Barstool. It's the career love of my life. I really loved it was so hard, but I loved my time there so much. I think when I joined Barstool, most conventional wisdom said that I was committing career suicide. And most people who I associated with was like, we're not going to associate with you. Why would you go there? There's something wrong with them. They've offended everyone. They're misogynistic. They're this, that, and the other thing. And my experience meeting them was nothing like what people said. I found Dave to be a really great listener. I found the guys there to be super earnest and insanely hardworking and very smart. And what I always said after I got there was it was actually the least sexist place I had ever worked because everything was out in the open. If something happened, we were talking about it on Twitter, or it was happening on Facebook Live, or it was, playing out in the blog. And so I think for women, I think the hardest thing about sexism at work or sexual harassment at work or just the glass ceiling at work is that most workplaces are so insidious that it's never talked about. And at Barstool, the great thing was terrible thing in some ways is everything was talked about all the time.
Yeah. No, that's great. I would imagine that for whether it's, like the people you were talking about that thought it was career suicide. I mean, I imagine it's really difficult to differentiate between sort of the content or the persona or what gets put out in hopes of, attracting eyeballs and getting views versus the actual humans themselves, right? And people try to maybe, did you find that was, how things
there were a
went?
lot of people. It was like a lot of death by headline. That was we live in an era of identity politics, and we live in an era of snap judgment where people really can't even be bothered at this point to go beyond a headline. If the headline says something, it must be true. And there are a lot of people who had a lot of bad headlines about Barstool Sports, and I always found it made me angry because I did think we had a high integrity company. I think there are high integrity people at Barstool in every capacity. And two is, we messed up all the time. And to your point, imagine starting every day with a blank page and having to get hundreds and then millions of page views. Like, that takes courage. And the third piece is it's very hard to be funny at this point in time. And, we didn't have the benefit of doing a Netflix special where you get a big disclaimer and you opt in and it says, if you're offended, it's on you. But that's what's hard about comedy right now. So I think the reality of what happened inside was a little bit different than how it looked on the outside. I think we had a lot of people who didn't like Barstool Sports, which actually helped us because it made the people who liked us feel like they had to fight for us. And I think we had a lot of, headline by judgment.
Right. Well, I mean, your tenure, you took it from a few $1 million in revenue to $300 million in revenue. You were the one at the helm, when this media empire sort of, took off. And what's so interesting to me is, it's almost like it's a whole new business model that didn't exist, 15, 20 years ago.
It was so forward. Yeah, it was so forward. But, the idea that we had, we were a network that was entirely distributed and built on social media and multi-format, multidisciplinary, lot of different IP, many different forms of monetization. I think Barstool Sports was the first company to, and probably the last, to grow using the pipes of the internet and to be able to monetize very diversely on the internet. And the reason I say the last is that, the platforms and the social platforms in particular, we were so lucky that, at that point in time, they were growing publishing brands. They were growing brands. In 2025 or 2024 or even 2023, they're only growing personality brands. So if Barstool was trying to be what we wanted it to be, and we started in 2023 versus 2004 when Dave started it, or 2016 when I showed up, we would have it. I don't know that it would be possible. It's a moment in time company.
Oh, wow, that's interesting. Well, so from the outside looking in, I mean, it seems like this is going to be way oversimplifying it, I realize, but it at least it looks like to me, sort of the big picture formula is if you can create a passionate, rabid fan base, or community, I should say, right? Create a passionate community and then deliver content in as many different ways as you can to be digested, then that community will continue to grow, et cetera. Is that it's interesting what you just said, that it may be hard to do it exactly like Barstool did, but do you think that we're going to see a lot more companies that try to follow that sort of model?
I think you're seeing thousands of people following that model, right? So that's Mr. Beast, Pat McAfee, the Barstool Gang, Alex Cooper, Alex Earl, Molly Baz, like, you name it, there is an influencer in a category that you're interested in who is trying to build an empire that looks kind of sort of like Barstool Sports. Like, that's happening all day long. I think brands, I'm trying to do it right now at Food52, and we'll see how that goes. I think brands will have a tougher run at it, but brands will try to bring personalities into their company so that they can grow through personalities.
I see. Okay, interesting. So yeah, the blueprint was sort of created by Barstool, and now there's going to be individuals are going to copy that and then be utilized as tools for brands. That's fascinating. Well, so I want to spend most of our time talking about Food52, and I also want to talk a little bit about your book as well. But I'm curious, our audience would also find curious. You went from Barstool, which was, you rough and rowdy, you created your own rules based around content. And then from there, you went with Penn Entertainment, right? And what was the difference? How did it just change overnight? Imagine being with a publicly traded entity.
Oh yeah, that was tough. That was tough. It was so exciting that Penn bought Barstool, right? Like it was everything we had hoped for. I came there to do that. So we were really, really grateful for Penn to take a chance on Barstool Sports. So we were, that was awesome. And it was a huge, huge moment for the company. And, to Penn's credit, they took a big risk. They did something that was quite unconventional in the betting space. And it also was at a moment in time where the betting industry looked like it was going to be very, very big, right? Where the addressable market was going to be very big. It was excruciatingly difficult to integrate into a publicly traded company. And partly because we were a wild, frenetic, no rules, anything goes type of brand on the internet. Part of it was we had a business model that had nothing to do with gambling and casino operations. So the two getting merged together was a lot. And then 3 is just gaming is a highly, highly, highly regulated, and it is deeply subjective. So what one regulator thinks or what one regulator wants or what one regulator likes or doesn't like has an immense bearing on a business. And I think we were very stressful for Penn because it was so volatile and because it was so unexpected. And it worked out the right way, which is, Barstool decoupled from Penn. But it was an interesting run.
Yeah, it sounds like almost what made Barstool so often compelling and attracted attention and eyeballs was also the thing that might get you in trouble with the regulators. So I could imagine
100%. Like what made us great made us a huge problem.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, that's fast. So, just real quickly, it feels to me like the whole sports gambling, betting industry is still trying to sort of figure out how they're going to get, let me back up. I think that the play from Penn was we can tap into Barstool's audience and have them betting through our platform or them gaming through our platform. Is your thought that they're still trying to figure, everybody in that industry still sort of trying to figure that out? Or is it?
Yeah. I mean, they make, like in so many businesses, a gaming company or sports betting company makes money based on how many people they have betting on their platform, how much they choose to bet, and how often. And Barstool has and had a very loyal, rabid audience. And what Penn was looking for was to tap into that. Penn, obviously then went on to do the same thing with ESPN. There's people who do this with Fox Sports. Like there's all sorts of tie-ups between companies that bring audience and can drive engagement and companies trying to sell products and services. And, you see that in a lot of different categories, but that's certainly true for gaming.
Yeah, no, that makes sense. Well, so tell us about Food52 and how that relates and what your plans are there.
Yeah, super different. So, I spent almost a decade at Barstool Sports. I spent an inordinate amount of time obsessing over, an 18 to 34-year-old consumer. And, like I'm a woman in my late 40s and I was like, hey, I've done this for a decade. We've sold the company twice. I'm never going to love anything work-wise like I've loved this, but I also felt like they didn't need me so much anymore. Like we had built the playbook, we had built the platform. It ran very smoothly. Like it looks like it doesn't run smoothly. It runs insanely smoothly. And it's an incredible business. And so I started to pick my head up and say, well, what would challenge me next? And what am I interested in? And where can I go learn? And what can I go do? And I was writing my book at the time. And what I wanted to do was to work in a business that had similarities, right? Internet business, content based, but also was very different, had a different consumer, had a different core business model. And Food52 was the company I ultimately chose. And what I liked about it was it had a lot of problems. There was like a lot of things I could fix. It had a huge amount of potential in terms of the home and food and life category. The audience is compelling, and I understand the audience because I am the audience. And women have a lot of power in terms of decision making around home and family and life and what you eat and what you do and what everything looks like. And I felt like this would be the right next challenge. And that's when I joined Food52.
Yeah, interesting. I saw I watched, I think it was a Netflix documentary on Martha Stewart and how she, her unbelievable career and the brand that she built and the different venues that she got to, her audience. So my understanding of Food52 is that it's built for the female audience in and around the house, whether it be entertaining, cooking, creating, etc. Tell us a little bit more about sort of the platform and what users would go there for.
Yeah, I think it's Martha Stewart built a world. She was like the first influencer, right? She built an empire around her point of view of what home and food should look like, taste like, be like. Food52 came from a dissimilar place. It was created by two women. One was a New York Times food writer, and it was, in 2014, they created it, I think in 2014. And it was the idea that the internet had changed everything and that you didn't have to have an authority, right? It didn't need to be Martha Stewart. You weren't going to be Martha Stewart, but a community could drive what the products look like and could inform how things are built and to create stories around products from a lot of different makers, and to really showcase artisans and craftspeople. And that was really the beginning of Food52. And then being really useful in someone's home, where, a lot of times when you're targeting women in particular, they don't have a lot of time. They've got a lot of pressures. You're trying to get a whole bunch of stuff done. You want it to be easy. You want it to be dependable. You want it to work. You also want it to be beautiful. You want it to be good for your home. So that's really where Food52 came from, and then built into a really beautiful shop and a really beautiful content experience.
Yeah. So it sounds like for women that are looking for whether solutions or what the latest and greatest is, or ideas, anything and everything sort of around home, that's the place you guys are trying to create that central, or are creating that central community for that audience.
Yes, that's right.
Well, if Barstool, the success for Barstool is any indication, then Food52 is going to be the next biggest thing that everybody's talking about.
I don't know about that. I don't think there's ever going to be another Barstool Sports, but I do think Food52 can be really special and unique, and we're on the way to get there now.
Yeah, well, that's fantastic. Well, so I'm really interested to hear a little bit more about your book. That nobody cares about your career.
Yeah.
So when did you start writing that book? Your book?
I started writing my book, I don't know, maybe let's see, what year? I started writing my book in 2023, late 2022, early 2023. What made me want to write it is that, we were going through the acquisition by Penn, and I was running this pirate ship, and it was very creative and very free. And every day we invented something. And then I was like, oh God, I'm in a lot of strategery meetings and I'm becoming corporate, and I'm spending most of my time figuring out a financial model versus figuring out how to build IP. And I was missing a lot of the creative aspects of my job. And I started to write the book on the train. I was also at the time getting dozens of work questions every week. So people would DM me with questions about work. Hey, my boss is an idiot. What do? I want to ask for a raise. I don't know how. And I was answering these questions like in the DMs. And I was like, God, writing a book would be a more efficient way to get this message out, because they were always the same questions. And so that's really when I started writing the book. The book is in 3 parts. So it's kind of like getting your head in the game to be great at work, and knowing what you want to get out of work. And then the second section is like the dailies of work, right? What do you do when your coworkers are a jerk? What do you do when you mess up? How do you deal with it? What does it mean to be a good manager? What do you have to do? How do you learn at work? How do you make work work for you? How do you manage conflict? All those kind of things. And then the last part of it is, how do you know when it's time to stay or go? And when do you want to leave a job, or when do you want to reinvent yourself in your job? And that's, the book is called Nobody Cares About Your Career, because I really believe 2 things, which is, one, you are the person who's going to make yourself successful or not successful. Like, there's nobody better than you coming along that's going to do it for you or fix you. And then the second piece is, you should be in your career for you, and not because you think it makes somebody else happy, or you're going through the motions because it's someone else's dream for you, but you really should do what's right for you. And I believe that work is, kind of tuition you get paid for, and that work can change your life. But I think it's very freeing. I think a lot of times people are afraid to fail at work, and they're afraid to fail because what will everybody say? And the reality is nobody cares. So you should fail as much as you can.
Yeah, I love that. I love that. And that's such great advice, especially for our particular audience. We talked a little bit before we started taping that, this is Boundary Breakers, and we've had on Navy SEALs and, Delta Force guys, Nobel Prize winners, billionaires, CEOs, et cetera. And what's really fascinates the audience, and fascinates me too, is trying to understand what are the commonalities between all of these hyper successful, extraordinary people. And the answers that I always get from these types of questions are just, I think, are so insightful. But I'm curious whether you're talking about Barstool or Food52. What are your thoughts on sort of the ingredients that need to be there in order so that sort of satisfy your gut? Like, all right, we might have lightning in a bottle here. I think we could really do something.
Oh, I think lightning in a bottle is Barstool is lightning in a bottle. Like, I could see it. Nobody else could see it, but I knew it. I knew it. So I think if you see something that is magic, you got to go for it. And a lot of times magic looks a little scruffy, and, for me, Barstool, people were like, why would you go to Barstool Sports? Like, you're a professional, blah, blah, blah. But I was like, no, these guys are onto something. And I know I'm the only one that sees it. Or not the only one, but one of few to see it. And so I think, my big thing there is, when you see lightning, you have to go for it. I got asked to join the board of Axon, which is a publicly traded company, incredible runaway stock, biggest stock success this year, incredible mission. And a lot of people, when I got offered the board seat, said, "Ugh, like, why would you do that? Like, that makes no sense." And I was like, this is lightning in a bottle. And so jumping for lightning in the bottle and how it shows up in your life is a great thing to do. Because it will take you to an incredible place, maybe a terrible place, but it's going to be incredible. And then I think, in terms of just making stuff work, is I really like to puzzle through problems, and I really like to tinker and think and try to fix stuff. And I think if you can find something to fix that makes you feel joy, or makes you feel satisfied, or makes you feel good, maybe it's helping other people, maybe it's solving a problem, maybe it's inventing something, maybe it's creating something, maybe it's making something work better. If you can do that really, and then work becomes really fun. And even if you work at, like, not a lightning in a bottle place, and not the coolest gig, or not the sexiest town, or whatever, but if you can find that and it can propel and motivate you, I think really incredible things can happen.
I love that. I love that. What about, could you speak to whether it be challenges or the opportunity of coming into a company and working with a founder, right? With
Yeah.
the Barstool case, like Dave Portnoy. I mean, it's got to be very challenging,
Yeah.
even if everyone is, wants to make it work and wants to make it happen.
Yeah. Founders are funny. I like founders. I like highly creative people. But founders are funny. It's typically their life's work, which like you can't underestimate how emotional something is when it's your life work. So I think the first thing is if you're going to work with a founder, you got to make sure the founder really genuinely wants someone to work with them. The thing for me that I really, when I met Dave Portnoy, had also been talking to a few other companies in the internet space. And one in particular had two female founders. And the female founders said that they wanted an executive to help them grow and do this, that, and the other thing. But I could see in how they answered questions and in their behavior that they really didn't. They didn't want a partner. And so I think the first thing is if you're going to work with a founder, make sure that founder wants to work with you or wants to work with this function. What I really loved about Dave was Dave knew what he didn't know, and he didn't want to control what he didn't know. And he knew what he did know, and he was really good at it, and he owned it. And then he was like, the rest is on you. And that was good for me because I had the same with him, and that made our relationship work. And then I think you've got to treat a founder with respect, but you also have to help a founder see where a company can go. And sometimes where that company can go is a different place than the company has been.
Interesting. Were there a lot of sort of passionate, I don't want to call them arguments, but a lot of passionate discussions about what the future would look like, and how do you?
At Barstool?
Yes, at Barstool.
No, Dave and I really didn't fight ever. Dave and I were always really pretty aligned. I think what you got to keep in mind is it was so crazy that it was a fire drill. Your back was against the wall and shit was happening at all times. So Dave and I actually had a really calm relationship because we were in the middle of such chaos and we generally saw the world the same way.
Yeah, that's great. Well, so one thing, one commonality that I've heard in several of your answers is that it takes, if you want to get where you're going, whether it be building a company or just finding a good spot for your career, you got to have guts.
Yeah.
Is that, and that's also, I think, been a recurring, thing for you in your career. What do you tell somebody that is like, I really want to do this, but I'm scared?
Oh, I mean, I'm scared every day. Like, I think you just got to move past it. I think, I saw a sign the other day I posted on my social, which is, a comfort zone is a nice place, but it's a terrible place to grow anything. And if you want to grow, you have to take risk. And you have to be totally okay with you might make the wrong choice and you might make a bad turn and you might screw it up. And I tend to believe that we're all optimists. So that even if you make the worst decision ever, you're going to be like, oh, but if I hadn't done that, this next thing wouldn't have happened. I left AOL, the CMO job of AOL. I was making a lot of money. I took a huge pay cut. I went to go work for this kind of no-name company in the music space. Was one of the hardest jobs I ever had. I was like, this is a mistake. I made a mistake. I took a bad job. If I hadn't done that, I don't think I would have found Barstool Sports. And so that's how I tend to look at it. So having guts is a little bit like going with what's inside of you and being confident in yourself, but also knowing that even if it's a disaster, it will usually work out okay.
I love that. Well, we're running up on time here, and I want to be respectful of it. So one final question: if you could go back to 2016, before everything took off with Barstool, and redo this whole story, everything, is there anything specific that you would change?
Oh, I wouldn't change anything.
I love it. Not a thing?
I wouldn't change anything. Nope.
Wow.
I wouldn't have changed anything. It was wild and it was exhilarating and it changed me profoundly. It was very difficult. I will have the battle scars from that time in my life forever, but I wouldn't have changed anything.
I love it. I love it. All right. Well, so for our audience, I want to make sure to tell them, how do they get to Food52?
Great. You go to food52.com, or you can follow Food52 on TikTok or YouTube or Instagram, or you could check out a brand called Schoolhouse. So schoolhouse.com, which makes beautiful lighting and furniture. And then you can find me at Erika, which is Erika, on Instagram, or you can find me on Substack. You can find me on YouTube and LinkedIn, and just type my name in and you can find me.
Awesome. And everybody go buy a copy of Erika's book, which is on Amazon.
Please, thank you.
You got it. You got it. I ordered my copy last week, and I'm digging in. Love it.
Oh, I'm so psyched. Thank you for having me so much.
Erika, thank you. You were incredible. Really appreciate it. Don't forget, everybody, you can find Boundary Breakers in a lot of places. You can watch our episodes on the Boundary Breakers YouTube channel, or you can listen to each podcast on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or any of the other major podcasting platforms. Thanks for listening.